House will be in order. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote of the yeas and nays are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on the postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6332.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6332, a bill to designate the facility of United States Postal Service located at 10660 Page Avenue in Fairfax, Virginia, as the Congressman Gerald D. Connolly Post Office Building.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Sessions, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw, each will control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous remarks in that measure.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I would yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman recognized.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Today, I rise in support of a bill which would rename a post office in Fairfax, Virginia, for one of our former colleagues, a former Congressman, Gerald E. Connolly, a father, a husband, a friend of mine, and to this body, a lifelong civil public servant, and one that dedicated his life to his constituents, his community, and to his country. Gerald Connolly began his life of service at the Heifer Project International in Little Rock, Arkansas. Arkansas is a beautiful young state that we have here in the United States, and he chose to move there and to live, to work on his project, begin his service. He then moved to Washington, D.C. in 1972. Jerry rose from the education director to executive director of the American Freedom from Hunger Foundation, while simultaneously serving as the executive director of the U.S. Committee on Refugees. He became a pillar of a person and stalwart for Northern Virginia through his 13 years on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors and served for 16 years as our colleague in this body representing Virginia's 11th Congressional District. In 2025, he was elected as the ranking member of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform after serving as a member of the committee since 2009. In Congress, Gerald Connolly was a friend to many of us, and my friend also. He was steadfast in fighting for what he believed in. He was always committed to bipartisanship where he thought we could agree, and he would find those issues, and I worked with him on many. Many of my Republican committee colleagues found Gerald Connolly to be a partner and a friend. The bottom line is that his exemplary public service will endure, continuing to guide and ensure those committed to serving our nation. I am sure that his life and the stories of his life are being told with many as an example of public service. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the gentleman for his eloquent remarks. This legislation is a tribute to a giant of public service, a man whose legacy is written across Northern Virginia and across this institution. Jerry Connolly believed deeply in public service. He believed in this institution, in the work of representative democracy, and in the responsibility that comes with the oath of office. He knew that democracy doesn't sustain itself. It takes people willing to do the hard, unglamorous work of governing, legislating, organizing, compromising, and showing up for the communities they serve. Jerry was a singular force, a force for good in Fairfax. And for 11 years, I had the privilege of serving as his chief of staff. I saw up close how he poured his significant intellect, his integrity, his energy into serving our community every single day. He's somebody who served the public with every fiber of his being until his last day. He was widely respected here as one of Congress's most effective lawmakers. He was a champion for the federal workers he represented, a champion for the Postal Service, a principled statesman who represented our nation at the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. I'm confident he's the only person in history who will have served twice as president of the Fairfax County Federation of Citizens Associations and twice as the president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. And before he served in Congress, he shaped the Fairfax County that my constituents know and enjoy today. He served on the Board of Supervisors from 1995 to 2008, including 5 years as chairman. He took enormous pride in that work and had a passion for the work of local government. Under his leadership, Fairfax County invested in smart growth, in transit, in environmental stewardship, in libraries, trails, and affordable housing. The public infrastructure that has transformed Fairfax and Northern Virginia into an economic engine and a national model. His legacy can be seen in the Silver Line Metro Extension, the Mosaic District in Merrifield, the Jerry Connolly Cross County Trail, and the Oakton Library. Jerry was an institutionalist in the best sense. He respected this house not as a monument, but as a living instrument of democracy, one that must be used to hold power accountable, to protect the dignity of public service, to defend those who don't have a voice, and to stand up for our democratic values at home and abroad. And Jerry had a heart as big as his intellect. He loved people. He loved animals. He loved our community. He loved a good conversation, a good story, and even good gossip, sometimes to the frustration of those who are trying to keep him on schedule. But above all, Jerry was a family man. He loved his wife, Smitty, who's here with us today in the gallery. Thank you, Smitty. With a devotion that everyone around him could see, he was endlessly proud of his daughter, Caitlin, and welcomed his son-in-law, Mark, into that circle of love and loyalty that defined him. For all of his accomplishments in public, the center of his world was always his family and the joy he took in them. It revealed the same warmth and humanity that made him so beloved by those he represented. For me, he was more than a member of Congress. He was a mentor, a best friend, a formative figure. Because of him, I'm a better public servant, but more importantly, a better husband, father, and friend. I'll carry his wisdom and his love for this community, for this institution with me for the rest of my life. Naming this post office for Congressman Gerald E. Connolly will ensure that generations of Fairfax residents are reminded of what public service looks like when it's rooted in integrity, vision, humor, and love of community. We lost a giant last year. We honor Jerry's legacy by continuing the work he loved, by serving others, speaking the truth, defending democracy, and never forgetting those who sent us here. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 6332, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I, too, while directing my comments directly to the young speaker, I would like to say that we, too, recognize not only Congressman Connolly's family being here, but we equally recognize, as Mr. Walkinshaw does, their contribution of service with their husband and their father and their uncle and those members of the family, because service goes beyond just a person. It is extended to the family, who many times is a part of the success that is gleaned from their service, but they're equal a part of it. And I, too, would like to recognize, on behalf of myself and my colleagues on this side, the generosity that they extended by being here today, for the service that they will be rewarded with and thanked for today. Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Byer.
The gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much, Congressman Walkinshaw. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 6332. As Mr. Walkinshaw has said, this legislation would name post office at 10660 Page Avenue in Fairfax as the Gerald E. Connolly Post Office in honor of my dear friend and former colleague, the late Congressman Jerry Connolly. Mr. Speaker, I used to tease Jerry all the time about the 41-mile Jerry Connolly cross-country trail in Fairfax County that was hiking and biking and bridle trail. It went for the whole arc from one side of Fairfax County to another. But this is a more difficult to imagine, a more fitting tribute to Jerry's lifetime of public service than this post office. Because no one, well, what he's done, he wrote, he sponsored, and passed the most important postal reform in this century, literally this millennia. I mean, he loved the Postal Service. He fought for it year after year after year. He served on the House Oversight Committee for 15 years and, again, was an immensely important leader on that committee. He fiercely believed in the federal government's commitment to the American public for affordable and reliable mail delivery for every single household in our country. But he was also a steadfast hero champion for the unsung heroes, the postal workers who made that possible. And he led the administration's attacks against the DOGE attacks on Postal Service and efforts by this administration to privatize the Postal Service. As Jerry Connolly often remembered, his public service is about leaving communities better than we found them. And Northern Virginia is a better place for Jerry's time in public service. I first met Jerry and Smitty when they came in as a young married couple 42 years ago, and we volunteered on the same governor's campaign. And over the years, everything that could be done by any human being to make life better for the citizens in Northern Virginia, Jerry did. As a civic association leader, a supervisor, a chairman, a congressman, the president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, everything that he did, and most of all, as the Democratic chair on oversight. Let me just say, Mr. Speaker, I will miss him greatly. This is a due and appropriate honor. Thank you.
Gentleman from Virginia Reserve.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I reserve.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. At this time, I have no additional speakers, and I would be prepared to close. I'll reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the gentleman from Texas for his kind and eloquent words. I also want to thank Chairman Comer for his support of this legislation. As I said, Jerry Connolly is somebody who loved this body. He loved Fairfax County. He loved the Postal Service. And this naming of the post office on Page Avenue in Fairfax will mean a lot to his family, but just as importantly will mean a lot to our community who recognizes his decades of dedicated, passionate service with integrity that he provided. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. The gentleman, Ms. Walkinshaw, has very nicely thanked the young chairman of the Oversight Committee, James Comer. And Mr. Comer, I think, really did work well with the minority to make sure not only this bill was handled appropriately, but to make sure that it could be scheduled in time, but the families would be here. Mr. Speaker, I encourage my colleagues and all of our colleagues to understand that today, by naming this post office is a nice way to remember not just the memory, but also the service that our late colleague Gerald Connolly provided. And I would ask for their support, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 6332? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 7809.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 7809, a bill to designate the facility of United States Postal Service located at 201 East Grant Avenue in Georgetown, Ohio, as the Ulysses S. Grant Post Office Building.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Sessions, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw, each will control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks, include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consent.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of a bill which would rename a post office in Georgetown, Ohio for Ulysses S. Grant. As an Ohio native, Grant was born in Pleasant Point and raised in Georgetown before attending the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. Upon graduation, he served with distinction in the Mexican-American War. He later went on to engage in several major battles during the American Civil War, eventually becoming the first officer appointed as Lieutenant General of the United States Army. Grant became the 18th President of the United States in 1869 and served 2 terms as President of the United States of America. Over his time in office, President Grant established the Department of Justice and oversaw the adoption of the 15th Amendment and other Reconstruction efforts that were important to this fledgling young nation. He is remembered as one of the great military geniuses and a symbol of national unity. I am pleased not only on behalf of Chairman James Comer to bring this bill forward, but also the important parts of this that come from the delegation from the great state of Ohio. Mr. Speaker, we will be hearing from them in just a few minutes. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman for Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, some of my Virginia ancestors are rolling over in their graves today, but I'm very happy to be here to speak in support of H.R. 7809 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 201 East Grant Avenue in Georgetown, Ohio, as the Ulysses S. Grant Post Office Building. Ulysses S. Grant was an American hero who helped lead the United States Army to victory against the Confederacy in the Civil War before serving as President of the United States. After graduating from West Point, Grant served in the Mexican-American War under the leadership of General Zachary Taylor, who would later become the 12th President of the United States. Grant initially resigned from the Army in 1854, but at the outbreak of the Civil War, he served as commander of a volunteer regiment and was quickly promoted to brigadier general. Throughout the war, he fought and won numerous battles. His victories included the capture of Fort Henry and Fort Donelson and the defeat of rebel forces at Shiloh and Vicksburg. As the war progressed, his military leadership played an instrumental role in enforcing President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation and advancing the United States' commitment to ending slavery. In March 1864, President Lincoln designated Grant as the General-in-Chief of U.S. Army Forces, ultimately leading to Union victory in April 1865 with the surrender of Confederate General Lee at Appomattox in Virginia. After the war, Ulysses S. Grant served 2 terms as President of the United States. During his time in office, he pushed forward the Reconstruction agenda, advocating for civil rights and protection from political violence for Black Americans. I encourage my colleagues to join us in honoring the life and legacy of President Grant by naming this post office in his hometown of Georgetown, Ohio, after him. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, the Ohio delegation supports this effort that we're doing today. And at this time, I'd like to yield 5 minutes to the distinguished gentleman, Congressman Dave Taylor, the state of Ohio.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, gentlemen, for yielding me the time. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of my bill to rename the Georgetown, Ohio Post Office the Ulysses S. Grant Post Office Building. President Grant was born on April 27, 1822, in Point Pleasant, Ohio. He spent his childhood in Georgetown, Ohio, a small town in Brown County, in what is today Ohio's 2nd Congressional District, before attending the United States Military Academy at West Point in 1839. Grant's time at West Point kicked off a legendary military career, beginning in the Mexican-American War and ending with the rank of General of the Army of the United States, a position he held until he became president. His accomplishments in the Civil War are too numerous to list, but after winning the battles at Fort Donelson, Shiloh, Vicksburg, Chattanooga, and Petersburg, he eventually accepted Robert E. Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, ending the Civil War and keeping the Union intact. Following his military service, on March 4th, 1869, Grant was sworn in as the 18th President of the United States, becoming the second Ohioan to serve as President. Throughout his 2 terms as President, Grant worked on civil rights issues, including the establishment of the Department of Justice, the adoption of the 15th Amendment, and other Reconstruction efforts. Ulysses S. Grant was an extraordinary American, worthy of being remembered. At a time when our nation was divided, much more divided than we are now, he was instrumental in bringing us back together. Without him, our nation and world would be a much different place. By renaming the post office in his hometown of Georgetown after him, we are further solidifying his profound legacy. I want to thank the entire Ohio delegation for supporting this legislation and thank Chairman Comer's staff for working with us throughout this process. Mr. Speaker, I urge all my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield my time. Thank you.
I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Virginia.
Very nice.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I too would like to join Mr. Taylor in thanking the Ohio delegation and really all of our members for the recognition of service to this great nation in the naming of this post office. The effort that the President made to represent the United States, unity that you heard about, his service to the United States military, his service to the Department of Justice, his service to the people of the country, to bring them together at a time when many thought we could not survive as a nation. To honor him now is without question the right thing to do, and naming this in his hometown of Georgetown, Ohio, is a high honor to the people of that town also. So I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, naming a post office for our 18th President of the United States, Ulysses S. Grant. And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 7809? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Purposes, gentleman from New York seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rule and pass the bill H.R. 8770 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8770, a bill to amend Title 49 United States Code to establish funds for investments in aviation security and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, a gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw, each will control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 8770.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
I rise in support of H.R. 8770, the Safeguards Act. This legislation establishes a sense of Congress that 9/11 passenger security fee revenue should be put towards TSA security screening purposes following the end of the current fee diversion at the end of fiscal year 2027. Additionally, this bill directs funds collected from this fee to modernize and sustain explosive detection systems and technology at TSA security checkpoints beginning in fiscal year 2028. Safeguards Act will strengthen aviation security by ensuring passenger security fee revenue is used for its intended purpose, providing additional resources to protect the traveling public. I want to thank Representative Strong for his leadership, and I look forward to continuing our engagement on both sides of the aisle and with our colleagues on the Appropriations Committee to ensure that this bill improves deployment timelines for critical aviation security technology without any unintended consequences for the TSA workforce or any other TSA operations. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, since the Transportation Security Administration was created after the 9/11 attacks, the agency has been working to deploy the latest innovative security screening technology to ensure prohibited items carried inside bags and on individuals do not make it past the security checkpoint and onto an aircraft. However, with thousands of TSA screening lanes across the country in need of technology, Congress has at times struggled to provide funding to recapitalize technology expeditiously across all airports. H.R. 8770, the Safeguards Act, would ensure there are increased dedicated funds available to TSA to procure the latest screening technology so the agency can replace aging technology deployed at airports at a more rapid pace. Although speeding up the deployment of new screening technology is an important goal, I do have some reservations about the bill. The increased investments in technology are not paid for, and I'm concerned that these increases could result in cuts to funding for TSA workforce salaries and benefits if TSA's overall budget does not increase. Although the bill does contain language reinforcing the sense of Congress that diversions of passenger security fees away from TSA's coffers should end, the bill does not actually do anything to end those diversions sooner than already scheduled under current law or otherwise to bring in more money to TSA. House Democrats have long been supportive of investments in new and innovative security technologies, but we must also make sure we're supporting the workforce that operates those technologies. To start, the House should take up Ranking Member Thompson's bill, H.R. 2086, the Rights for the TSA Workforce Act, which would codify fair pay and collective bargaining rights for this critical workforce. This bill has more than 185 bipartisan co-sponsors, and the Republican majority should bring it to this floor. In the meantime, I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, as well as our colleagues in the Senate, to ensure that the Safeguards Act, if enacted, drives investments in technology without causing cuts to pay, benefits, or staffing at TSA. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York.
I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Strong.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of my bill, the Safeguards Act. When Americans purchase an airline's ticket, they pay a passenger security fee with an expectation that those dollars will be used to strengthen aviation security. That's what Congress intended when the fee was created, and that's exactly what this bill restores. For years, revenue from the passenger security fee has been directed away from its intended purpose. Meanwhile, our airports continue to face evolving threats and increasing demand on the systems and technologies that help keep travelers safe. The Safeguards Act restores accountability and directing this revenue back toward critical aviation security priorities following the expiration of the current fee diversion. This legislation invests $500 million annually in checked baggage screening technology and $250 million annually in the checkpoint technology upgrades. This will help modernize screening capabilities, strengthen security operations, and ensure our aviation system remains prepared to meet current and future threats. Let me be clear, this is not a new fee. This will not be placed on flyers, and it does not raise taxes. The Safeguards Act simply ensures that the fees travelers currently pay is used for its original purpose and in line with the expectation of the traveling public. Anytime a fee is collected from the American people, it should carefully be scrutinized. I take that responsibility seriously, which is why I examined the intent of this fee. I asked first whether the original purpose behind it remains important today. I believe it does. The fee was established in the aftermath of September the 11th, one of the darkest days in our nation's history. In the years that followed, Congress recognized that maintaining a safe and secure aviation system would require a long-term commitment to aviation security and continued investments in the technologies that help protect the traveling public. The passenger security fee was created to support that mission, and travelers have paid it with the expectation that those dollars would be used to strengthen aviation security. I'm proud to reaffirm our commitment to the traveling public today with this bill. The Safeguards Act is about restoring trust, improving transparency and accountability, and ensuring the aviation security dollars are spent on aviation security. I'm proud that this legislation has earned bipartisan support and the backing of airports, airlines, and the traveling organizations across the country. I want to thank Chairman Garbarino for his leadership and support in advancing this legislation. I also want to thank Mr. Kennedy for partnering with me on this effort, as well as my colleagues who have joined as co-sponsors. I urge all members to support the Safeguards Act, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Reserves. Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers. I'm prepared to close when the chairman is prepared to close, and I reserve.
Reserves. Gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Evans.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and today I rise in support of the Safeguards Act, of which I'm a proud original co-sponsor. As my colleagues mentioned, this bill ensures that all revenue collected through the 9/11 passenger security fee are invested back into aviation and airport security, consistent with the fee's original intent. Just last year, this $5.60 fee on your plane ticket brought in over $4.5 billion total dollars from U.S. passengers. The upcoming 25th anniversary of September 11th reminds us how important it is to use those resources to strengthen our national security systems today to prevent future tragedies tomorrow. My district also borders Denver International Airport. Thousands of airport, airline, and TSA employees in that airport are my constituents, the third busiest in the nation. To keep them and all U.S. passengers safe, it's critical that TSA receives every dollar possible to properly update security screening equipment and stop emerging threats. I urge my colleagues to join in supporting this bipartisan bill and yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 8770 will help ensure TSA's frontline staff get more of the tools they need to keep travelers safe and at a faster pace. We look forward to working with our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to ensure there are no unintended consequences for TSA's workforce if this bill becomes law, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. As you just heard from my colleague from Colorado, $4.5 billion was brought in last year under the 9/11 security fee. What passengers don't know is that the first $1.6 billion last year was diverted to something else other than passenger security. This bill would say the first $750 million of that passenger security fee would go directly to equipment, and then the balance of that money would go to TSA general fund, which actually would allow them, the discretionary fund, which will allow the TSA to get access to this money. Last year, TSA discretionary fund didn't get access to this until the first $1.85 billion was spent. Now they're going to get access, if this bill becomes law, at the $750 million after the first $750 million is spent on security equipment to make our traveling public safe. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 8770, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Is, will the House suspend rules and pass the bill H.R. 8770 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. First, does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 9328 as amended.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 9328, a bill to improve travel for active duty military personnel and accompanying family and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw, each will control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous materials on H.R. 9328.
Without objection,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
the gentleman is recognized.
I rise in support of H.R. 9328, the Improving Travel for Military Members Act. The Improving Travel for Military Members Act will allow the TSA administrator to establish a 3-year pilot program to expedite access to security screening for traveling active duty military personnel and their accompanying family members. If established, this pilot program will focus on airports closest to military installations with large active duty populations, which will help to ease the travel for men and women bravely serving our nation. I want to thank Representative Biggs for her leadership and encourage my colleagues to support the bill. I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 9328, the Improving Travel for Military Members Act. Our military service members and their families are required to travel regularly, uprooting their lives to move to new locations. Last year, TSA initiated a pilot program at select airports to provide active duty military and their families front-of-line access to security screening. H.R. 9328 would cement TSA's ongoing pilot program and codify requirements for appropriate security protocols. Expediting wait times for service members and their families makes travel a little bit easier and a little bit less stressful for them, and I support advancing this effort. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Speaker, I yield as much time as she may consume to the gentlewoman from South Carolina, Ms. Biggs.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Garbarino, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't speak on this legislation as an outside observer. As a member currently serving in the Air National Guard, I have worn the uniform. I have seen firsthand what it asks of service members and their families. This legislation is written from experience, not just policy. Mr. Speaker, more than 1.3 million Americans serve our nation on active duty, and they answer the call with very little notice, shipping out on deployment orders, relocating their families across the country on PCS moves, or rushing to emergency assignments at a moment's notice. They don't get to plan ahead. They don't get to choose their travel dates. They simply go because that's what the service requires. That means in my home state, last summer, the Transportation Security Administration launched the Serve with Honor, Travel with Ease initiative to better support our service members while advancing much-needed modernization across our aviation system as passenger volumes continue to grow. Depending on the airport, military members and their families may not receive expedited screening through dedicated lines, preferred lanes, or front-of-line access. My legislation, the Improving Travel for Military Members Act, it builds on this important effort by establishing a 3-year pilot program to expedite security screening for active duty military personnel and their accompanying family members, with priority given to airports located near military installation. That means in my home state of South Carolina, which is home to a number of military installations, service members will benefit from faster, more efficient travel while maintaining the same high security standards. Let me be very clear. Every passenger remains subject to appropriate security screening. What this bill does is gives airports the flexibility to implement the program based on their own operational needs, their proximity to military bases, and passenger volume. This bill is targeted, it is practical, and it is fiscally responsible. A few minutes saved at a security line may seem insignificant to some, but to a military spouse managing 3 children and a cross-country move on 48 hours' notice, it is anything but. It sends a message to every service member and their family. America sees you, values you, and respects the sacrifices you make in service to our country. I urge my colleagues to support this important piece of legislation for our service members and their families, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. Mr. Speaker, military service members and their families make sacrifices for our nation every day. We owe it to them to make their lives easier in ways big and small, wherever and whenever we can. And this bill represents a step toward easier travel for active duty military and their families. I thank the gentlewoman for her work on it, and I yield back the balance of my time.
When yields, the gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 9328, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 9328 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the floor. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8874.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 647, H.R. 8874, a bill to amend the James M. Inhofe National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023 to require recurring reports on the transition of jurisdictions no longer eligible for Urban Area Security Initiative funding and for the purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks to include any extraneous material on H.R. 8874.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Recognized.
I rise in support of H.R. 8874, the Homeland Security Capabilities Preservation Reporting Act of 2026. This legislation requires DHS to provide a report to Congress every 3 years on the Homeland Security capabilities of urban areas that have previously received funding through the Urban Area Security Initiative, or UASI. The FEMA Grant Programs Directorate provides preparedness funding to assist states, localities, urban areas, and tribal and territorial governments in strengthening the nation's ability to prevent, protect against, respond to, and recover from terrorist attacks, major disasters, and other emergencies. Every year, FEMA determines eligible, high-risk urban areas for UASI funding through an analysis of relative risk of terrorism experienced by urban areas in the United States. As relative terrorism risk undertaken by urban area jurisdictions changes every year, this can sometimes lead to urban areas that were once eligible for UASI funding in one year no longer being eligible in future years. This legislation will provide consistent information to Congress on the ability of urban areas at risk of terrorism threats to maintain their homeland security capabilities. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve.
Gentleman yields. For what purpose does the gentleman from, gentleman from Virginia is recognized? Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter, the sponsor of this bill.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I thank Representative Walkinshaw for yielding. I rise today in support of my bill, H.R. 8874, the Homeland Security Capabilities Preservation Reporting Act of 2026. In the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, it became evident that cities across the United States could become targets for terrorist attacks and that they lacked the capacity and resources to independently build the critical capabilities needed to prevent such, to protect against, and to respond to terrorist attacks and other catastrophic events. Beginning in 2003, urban areas across the nation began receiving dedicated counterterrorism grants from the Department of Homeland Security and through the Urban Area Security Initiative, or UASI. For more than 2 decades, this program has equipped our local first responders with advanced tools, equipment, and training necessary to protect their communities. These investments have built critical capabilities that strengthen preparedness and emergency responses across the region. However, maintaining these capabilities cannot be sustained by locals alone. They require reliable, predictable federal funding. Unfortunately, unpredictable changes to DHS's risk formula, which determines which areas receive funding, have often created year-to-year uncertainty, leaving many cities wondering whether their counterterrorism funding will suddenly disappear. Recently, these funding changes have been politically arbitrary. We saw this danger firsthand last year when, under the leadership of former Secretary Kristi Noem, the Department of Homeland Security attempted to abruptly remove historically funded cities, including my district, the city of New Orleans, from this program. Former Secretary Noem tried to cut our federal counterterrorism funding support in the same year our community suffered a horrific attack on Bourbon Street, New Orleans, on New Year's Day, which killed 14 people and injured dozens more, and it took a lawsuit to stop them. Here's the bottom line. Expecting locals to independently finance the massive security required for everyday safety, let alone high-profile events like Mardi Gras, World Cup, or Super Bowl, is unrealistic and unfair. And abruptly turning off of these resources is dangerous. Congress previously acknowledged that the value of UWASE funding to communities by requiring a one-time report in the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, examining how DHS could help cities transition when they lose grant eligibility. I'm grateful for former Congresswoman Val Demings for championing this previous NDAA provision and for her leadership in recognizing the need to support communities if they transition out of the UWASE program. However, a one-time report leaves Congress in the dark going forward. We need ongoing data to monitor vulnerable communities after they are removed from the program and identify whether their security capabilities are at risk of degrading. That's why I introduced H.R. 8874, the Homeland Security Capabilities Preservation Reporting Act of 2026. This bipartisan bill closes this oversight gap by requiring FEMA to submit reoccurring reports every 3 years on how cities manage and maintain their federally funded counterterrorism and security capabilities after they lose UWASE funding. This bill will improve public safety across the nation and ensure our communities are never left defenseless, which is why it's endorsed by the Major Cities Chief Association, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the National League of Cities, and the National Fusion Association, to name a few. I want to thank Ranking Member Benny Thompson and Representative Jimenez for their partnership on this bill. I urge all of my colleagues to support this vital, common sense legislation. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman for Virginia Reserves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter, for his work on this legislation. UWASE grants have played a critical role in my region, the D.C. metropolitan region, in protecting Northern Virginia, Maryland, and the District of Columbia, including this Capitol complex. So this bill that will improve transparency, strengthen congressional oversight, and ensure that important security investments made over many years are not lost is a wonderful piece of legislation. With that, Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Virginia
Speaker,
from New York.
I have no more speakers prepared to close after the gentleman from Virginia closes.
Gentleman reserves. Virginia's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank again the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter, for his work on this legislation. I want to thank the chairman. Passage of H.R. 8874 will ensure that Congress has the information needed to understand the impact of UWASE transitions and help preserve the critical homeland security capabilities our communities rely on. It will strengthen oversight, support our local partners, and help ensure that years of federal investment and preparedness are not lost. I applaud Congressman Carter for his leadership on this issue and strongly urge my colleagues to support H.R. 8874, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. I also want to applaud the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter, for his leadership on this piece of legislation. As a member from New York, I've seen firsthand the benefits and the need for the UASI grants, and I think it is very important that Congress be kept informed of decisions being made over when it comes to these grants. So I urge my colleagues to support this bill, H.R. 8874, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8874? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion is considered laid on the floor. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 9391 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill, please.
H.R. 9391, a bill to authorize an extension and expansion of the reimbursable screening services program of the Transportation Security Administration and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 9391.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman recognized.
I rise in support of H.R. 9391, the Reimbursable Screening Services Program Extension Act of 2026. First established in 2019, the Reimbursable Screening Service Program is a pilot program that allows screening services to be conducted outside the primary passenger terminal screening area. This pilot program has helped provide TSA with reliable streams of revenue while at the same time maintaining a safe and efficient screening environment. This bill extends the Reimbursable Screening Services Program through fiscal year 2031 and increases the number of allowable participating entities from 8 to 14. The Reimbursable Screening Services Program Extension Act will provide increased certainty for this pilot program to ensure it can continue to develop while Congress assesses its long-term viability. I would also like to thank the gentlewoman from New Jersey, Representative Poe, for co-sponsoring this important legislation. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 9391, the Reimbursable Screening Services Program Extension Act of 2026. The TSA Reimbursable Screening Services Program, or RSSP, is a pilot program that permits TSA to conduct passenger screening outside primary airport terminal screening areas under reimbursable agreements with up to 8 TSA-regulated entities, such as an airport operator. RSSP facilities are located at airports across the country, including in Los Angeles, Atlanta, and New York City, and the newest location recently opened in Boston. The pilot program is set to expire at the end of September 2026. H.R. 9391 would extend the pilot program until the end of September 2031 and expand the number of pilot program locations to 14 to allow the program to grow and bring new RSSP concepts online. Passing this bill would provide important clarity for a program that has been operating under repeated short-term extensions. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers and prepared to close after the gentleman from Virginia closes.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers. I'm prepared to close. I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, this bill ensures the RSSP at TSA can continue to operate and develop additional screening locations at airports across the country to improve the travel experience. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman is recognized.
I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 9391, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 9391 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion is to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 9388.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 644, H.R. 9388, a bill to amend Title 49 United States Code to authorize an extension of a program to permit screened passengers and their property arriving on direct flights or flight segments originating at certain foreign last point of departure airports to continue on additional flights or flight segments originating in the United States without additional screening and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous materials on H.R. 9388.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I rise in support of H.R. 9388, the One-Stop Pilot Program Extension Act. This legislation extends the One-Stop Security Pilot Program for an additional 4 years. The One-Stop Security Pilot Program is operated by TSA and aims to streamline travel for passengers returning to the United States from international travel who have domestic connections. Under the usual screening process, passengers coming from outside the United States undergo inspection by Customs and Border Protection, collect their checked bags, and exit the sterile area of the airport. Under the one-stop security screening process, passengers undergo security screening at their departure airport and fly to a one-stop participating airport where they are cleared by CBP, but they can be routed straight to the sterile area of the airport instead. In doing so, passengers are not required to re-enter through TSA screening, as they have already been screened at their departure airport using the same standards and technologies required by TSA. As additional airports work to join this pilot program, passengers will be able to continue on their journey with greater ease and efficiency once they return to the United States. I want to thank Representative Jimenez, the chairman of our committee's Transportation and Maritime Security Subcommittee, for his leadership and urge my colleagues to support this bill. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 9388. TSA's one-stop security pilot program enables passengers arriving from certain foreign airports to be exempt from rescreening by TSA prior to connecting to domestic flights. The one-stop program requires those foreign airports to meet certain standards deemed comparable to TSA's, which helps improve aviation security at those airports. As more international airports start participating in the program, H.R. 9388 will ensure it can continue to operate until December 2032 while Congress evaluates and makes any necessary changes to improve the program for the traveling public. These changes will help advance this pilot program to improve the travel experience for passengers. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Jimenez.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Garbarino. And Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of my bipartisan One-Stop Pilot Program Extension Act. In South Florida, Miami International Airport is one of the busiest international gateways in the United States. Every day, millions of passengers pass through airports like Miami International throughout the country. We have a responsibility to keep those passengers and our airports moving efficiently while maintaining the highest security standards. This bill does exactly that. By extending that successful pilot program, passengers arriving from trusted foreign airports can connect to their final destination without unnecessary duplicate baggage screening. Security is never compromised. Every participating airport must meet strict TSA standards. Customs and Border Protection retains full oversight, and any passenger or bag identified as a security concern receives additional inspection. This common-sense bipartisan legislation will reduce delays, ease congestion, improve the travel experience, and strengthen our aviation system while protecting our homeland. I want to thank our chairman, Chairman Garbarino. Also, I want to thank the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter, for co-sponsoring this legislation. I urge my colleagues to support the One-Stop Pilot Program Extension Act, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Speaker, I reserve.
Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter, the Democratic co-lead of this bill.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, and thank you, Representative Walkinshaw, for yielding. I rise in support of H.R. 9388, the One-Stop Pilot Program Extension Act, which I am proud to co-lead with Congressman Jimenez. This bipartisan measure will modernize our aviation system, reduce unnecessary delays, and strengthen our international security partnership that keeps our skies safe. Today, the international passengers connecting to domestic flights must often retrieve their checked bags, clear customs, and then undergo yet another screening process through TSA before re-entering the terminal, creating congestion, long connection times, and avoidable operational strain on airports and the airlines. The One-Stop Security Program is current TSA pilot initiative that streamlines this process for travelers arriving from trusted foreign airports to meet strict U.S. security standards, allowing them and their baggage to connect directly to domestic flights without duplicative screening. The One-Stop Pilot Program Extension Act extends the authorization for the One-Stop Security Program for 4 more years, giving TSA, Customs and Border Protection, and participating airports time to scale the program, expand international partnerships, and evaluate the infrastructure needed for broader implementation. This extension will not only improve efficiency and reduce cost, but also strengthen the competitiveness of our domestic travel and tourism industries. Cities like that of my district, City of New Orleans, where tourism is a major economic engine, stand to benefit from smoother international to domestic connections that make the U.S. a more attractive destination and keep our visitors spending, flowing into local economies, and supporting our communities. I would like to thank Representative Jimenez for his leadership on this bill, and I urge favorable passage. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the balance of my time.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. Mr. Speaker, this bill will continue operations for this growing TSA pilot program, helping to improve the travel experience for inbound passengers on international flights. I urge my colleagues to support this measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 9388, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. Bill 9388? Those in favor say yea. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3106.
The clerk will report the bill.
Union Calendar Number 648, H.R. 3106, a bill to require the Secretary of Homeland Security to conduct a collective response to a terrorism exercise that includes the management of cascading effects on critical infrastructure during times of extreme cold weather and for the purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw, each will control 20 minutes. The chair will recognize the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks to include extraneous material on H.R. 3106.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I rise in support of H.R. 3106, the Weatherizing Infrastructure in the North and Terrorism Emergency Readiness Act of 2025. This legislation requires the Secretary of Homeland Security, acting through appropriate offices and components of DHS, to develop and conduct an exercise featuring the participation of federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial agencies and private sector stakeholders focusing on a collective response to terrorism that includes the management of the cascading effects on critical infrastructure that result from the occurrence of a terrorist attack during an extreme cold weather event. DHS must then provide an after-action report to Congress consisting of initial findings, plans to incorporate any lessons learned into future DHS operations, and any proposed legislative changes informed by this exercise. This legislation will help strengthen the United States' ability to respond to terrorist threats especially when they might coincide with extreme weather events. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Kennedy, the sponsor of this bill.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I thank Representative Walkinshaw for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of my bill, H.R. 3106, the Weatherizing Infrastructure in the North and Terrorism Emergency Readiness Act, also known as the Winter Act. As a nation, we must be prepared to prevent and respond to terrorist threats in every circumstance, including during the harshest winter weather. That's why I introduced the Winter Act, to strengthen our homeland security posture during extreme cold weather conditions and ensure that the Department of Homeland Security is prepared to respond. My hometown of Buffalo, New York is no stranger to cold weather events. In December 2022, Winter Storm Elliott hit western New York with historic force. During the Christmas holiday, this powerful storm brought dangerous blizzard conditions, including 60-mile-an-hour winds, dangerous levels of lake effect snowfall, and life-threatening sub-freezing temperatures. Thousands lost power, phone lines went dark, and roads became impassable, bringing emergency operations and critical infrastructure in the city of Buffalo to a screeching halt. This catastrophic storm claimed 47 precious lives in our community. Families endured unimaginable hardship and heartbreak, and local governments have spent years responding to the disaster to help neighborhoods recover. Now imagine the devastation if, amid a major winter storm of this caliber, our nation was forced to respond to a terrorist attack. Severe winter conditions often strain emergency response capabilities, disrupt communications, and damage critical infrastructure, making an already dangerous situation even more dire. These challenges are precisely why terrorists may view extreme weather as an opportunity to exploit vulnerabilities and magnify the impact of an attack. My legislation directs the Department of Homeland Security to conduct a terrorist preparedness exercise focused on the effects of an attack on critical infrastructure during an extreme cold weather event. It also requires DHS to report to Congress on successes and potential pitfalls of the preparedness analysis, ensuring that we understand where existing security gaps remain. The insights and expertise gained from this exercise will strengthen coordination among emergency managers, state officials, and community partners, helping them better anticipate and mitigate the consequences of such an attack. By identifying security gaps before disaster strikes, we can enhance our resilience and be better prepared to withstand and respond to an increasingly sophisticated act of terrorism. We cannot control when the next severe winter storm will strike, and we cannot predict when terrorists will look to exploit our vulnerabilities, but we can ensure that our Homeland Security enterprise is prepared for both. That's exactly what this legislation will help us do. I want to thank the chairman of the committee, Representative Garbarino, for his support. I want to especially thank Representative and Ranking Member Benny Thompson for his partnership on this bill, and I urge all of my colleagues to support this vital legislation. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time.
The gentleman is recognized.
I applaud Representative Kennedy's leadership on this bill, and I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 3106, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. I want to thank Representative Kennedy and congratulate him on this hard work. Nobody knows how to remove snow quite like those Buffalo Bills fans, especially on game day. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 3106, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3106? Those in favor say yea. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking the vote by yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number have risen. The yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20. Further proceedings of the questions will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8897 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8897, a bill to improve travel for American families and for the purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, will be, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Waukesha, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous materials on H.R. 8897.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I rise in support of H.R. 8897, the Improving Travel for American Families Act. This bill allows the TSA administrator to establish a 2-year pilot program to expedite access and implement alternative screening lanes for passengers and accompanying children under the age of 12. If established, this pilot program would be prioritized at airports with high volumes of family travelers, as well as at airports that have the space to accommodate additional screening lanes. This legislation will help ease the burdens families face when traveling with young children and improve the overall passenger experience. I want to thank Representative McKenzie for his leadership and urge my colleagues to support this bill. I reserve.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 8897, the Improving Travel for American Families Act. Every day, thousands of families across our nations take to the skies, many of them with small children who are not always the easiest of travel companions. I can attest to that. Any parent knows that long lines at checkpoints can make a long day of travel even worse for a kid. That's why since last year, the TSA has started pilot programs at select airports with special lines reserved for families, which help decrease wait times while keeping screening efficient for other travelers as well. H.R. 8897 would codify the ongoing pilot program and ensure appropriate security protocols are upheld. The bill would help advance this initiative to help traveling families. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. McKenzie.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 8897, the Improving Travel for American Families Act, which I am leading alongside my colleague, Representative Fushi. Americans everywhere understand that there are better, easier, and more efficient ways to manage safety screenings at our airports. That was made clear when this legislation was reported unanimously by the Committee of Homeland Security by a vote of 30-0. We're bringing both sides together to give families the more convenient air travel experience that they deserve. As the father of 2 young children, I know firsthand that family travel can be challenging. Parents often have to navigate crowded airports while juggling strollers, diaper bags, car seats, and more, all while taking their families through the large crowds and navigating long lines. Every parent is aware that the most stressful part of this process can be the TSA screening point. Families with an array of bags and bulky items pack into the same lanes as business travelers with a small carry-on. The resulting problems can create stress for parents and frustration for everyone else. That's why H.R. 8897 allows the TSA to establish a pilot program that builds on its existing Families on the Fly initiative, which identifies ways to make the security screening process easier for adults traveling with children 12 years of age and under. Through this initiative, the TSA is establishing dedicated lines reserved for families, giving them more space, time, and flexibility at security checkpoints. Because of this program, parents are able to move through screening more smoothly, children have a less stressful experience, and security lines operate more efficiently for everyone in the airport. Importantly, this legislation does not change TSA's screening requirements or security standards. It simply allows the agency to test practical, family-friendly improvements while maintaining the same level of security that travelers expect. This is common sense, bipartisan legislation that will help modernize travel experience for American families while improving efficiency at our nation's airport. I again thank Representative Fushi for her partnership in this legislation, and I urge all of my colleagues to support H.R. 8897. I yield back.
Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. Mr. Speaker, the airport experience is difficult enough for young families. This bill will help improve that experience while upholding security standards, and I urge support. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields from Virginia. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 8897, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 8897 as amended? Those in favor say yea. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. What purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking the vote by yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number has having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20. Further proceedings of this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8168.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar number 642, H.R. 8168. A bill to require an assessment of terrorism threats to the United States posed by foreign terrorist organizations and specially designated global terrorists present in countries that are major non-NATO allies and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 8168.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I rise in support of H.R. 8168, the Major Non-NATO Allied Terror Threat Assessment Act. Major Non-NATO Allied Terror Threat Assessment Act requires the Secretary of Homeland Security, in consultation with the Secretary of State and the Director of National Intelligence, to submit a report to Congress assessing terrorism threats from designated terrorist organizations operating in countries designated by the United States as a major non-NATO ally. Major non-NATO allies benefit from expedited procedures in the foreign military sales process, and this status also makes them desirable for foreign military financing. Major non-NATO allies are also eligible for enhanced defense research collaboration and the positioning of the U.S. defense equipment. Over time, there has been inconsistent oversight of the major non-NATO allies program, and today there are situations where U.S. designated terrorist organizations are present or operating in countries that have also been designated major non-NATO allies. This legislation will strengthen oversight of the program to ensure the United States has an adequate threat picture when it comes to terrorist activity in the designated major non-NATO allies. I want to thank Representative Van Epps for his leadership, and I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 8168, the Major Non-NATO Ally Terror Threat Assessment Act. This bill directs the Secretary of Homeland Security, in consultation with the Secretary of State and the Director of National Intelligence, to provide an assessment of the threats to the United States posed by foreign terrorist organizations and specially designated global terrorists present in countries that the State Department designates as major non-NATO allies. The assessment required under the bill will give Congress a more comprehensive view of terrorist threats to the homeland, which will inform Congress of authorities and resources needed to combat those threats. Mr. Speaker, I support the bill and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Van Epps.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of my bill, H.R. 8168, the Major Non-NATO Ally Terror Threat Assessment Act. When the United States designates a nation as a major non-NATO ally, MNNA, it comes with security cooperation and possible trade deals for defense equipment. This is an important designation that our nation does not grant lightly. However, we cannot ignore the fact that foreign terrorist organizations continue to operate in or around some MNNA countries, creating threats that could have serious consequences for U.S. national security. For that reason, it's critical for Congress to have a full picture of the terrorist organizations that may be operating within our partner nations. And that's why I introduced this legislation. My bill strengthens coordination between the Department of Homeland Security and Congress to better assess and support MNNA partners as they confront threats within their own borders. It requires the Department to provide Congress with a comprehensive assessment identifying foreign terrorist organizations operating within MNNA countries, as well as each partner's capacity to counter those threats. These partnerships are important, but we must also protect our own national security. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to join me in voting in favor of this bill and yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the new member, Mr. Van Epps, on this legislation. I support H.R. 8168, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. I want to congratulate Mr. Van Epps. This is his first piece of legislation that will be passing Congress today, the House, and I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 8168, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8168? Those in favor say yea. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8535 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8535, a bill to direct the Secretary of Homeland Security to develop performance metrics relating to the detection, deterrence, and seizure of fentanyl.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Waukesha, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 8535.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 8535, the Measuring Illicit Fentanyl Trafficking Act. This legislation requires the Secretary of Homeland Security to develop performance metrics relating to detection, deterrence, and seizure of illicit fentanyl for the Department of Homeland Security and each of its components. Additionally, this bill requires each relevant DHS component to share information related to detection, deterrence, and seizure of fentanyl with each other, as well as identify any barriers to sharing information and data. Fiscal year 2023 National Defense Authorization Act required DHS to establish a program to collect data and develop measures to assess the effectiveness of efforts to detect and deter illicit fentanyl. It also required the Government Accountability Office to audit the program. A September 2025 GAO report analyzed the department's efforts to combat fentanyl trafficking with findings that DHS had not yet established the program, that CBP was not provided adequate information from across DHS components that would inform the program, and that DHS had not developed performance goals and metrics to track them. This legislation will support current DHS efforts to implement these requirements and combat the flow of illicit fentanyl into the United States. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, H.R. 8535, the Bipartisan Measuring Illicit Fentanyl and Trafficking Act, is based on the nonpartisan research and recommendations of the Government Accountability Office, which last year examined the Department of Homeland Security's efforts to detect, deter, and seize illicit fentanyl. GAO identified critical gaps in DHS efforts against fentanyl trafficking: a lack of coordination, information sharing, and measures to assess DHS's effectiveness. As a result, GAO made 3 straightforward recommendations. First, establish a program to collect data and measure effectiveness. Second, ensure access to information across DHS components. And third, develop performance goals and measures aligned with DHS's strategic objectives. Our bill simply would put into law those common sense recommendations. Fentanyl remains one of the most devastating public safety and public health challenges facing our nation. The scourge of fentanyl trafficking is sobering. CDC data showed that fentanyl accounted for over 69% of all drug overdose deaths in the United States in 2025. Last year alone in the DC metropolitan region, there were nearly 1,000 deaths due to fentanyl overdose. With lives, resources, and time on the line, it's important for DHS personnel to not only work hard in the fight against illicit fentanyl, but to also work smart against this enormous challenge. That requires collaboration and the ability to assess how their operations are having an impact. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I have no more speakers and am prepared to close after the gentleman from Virginia closes.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank Mr. McCall, who was my co-lead on this legislation. I want to thank the chairman, Ranking Member Thompson, and Mr. Correa as well, who worked hard on it. As I said, this bipartisan legislation would put 3 GAO recommendations for combating illicit fentanyl into law. It would require the establishment of a program to collect data and measure the effectiveness of current efforts to counter illicit fentanyl, ensure information sharing across DHS components, and require the development of performance goals and measures. With that, Madam Speaker, I urge all members to join me in supporting H.R. 8535 and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman for Virginia yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. I want to congratulate and thank Mr. Walkinshaw on his hard work on this bill. It's a great piece of legislation. I encourage my colleagues to support H.R. 8535, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8535 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. For what purpose is the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 7574.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 640, H.R. 7574. A bill to provide for the reorganization and realignment of the Engagement Liaison and Outreach Office of the Department of Homeland Security and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 7574.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
I rise in support of H.R. 7574, the ELO Realignment and Strategic Engagement Reform Act of 2026. Department of Homeland Security's Engagement, Liaison, and Outreach, or ELO office, operates as a separate office within the Office of Intelligence Analysis. Despite their similar functions, ELO operates separately from the INA's Partner Engagement Directorate, which facilitates information flows and access for state, local, tribal, and territorial partners. The ELO Realignment and Strategic Engagement Reform Act will require the DHS Secretary to develop a comprehensive plan to reorganize the ELO office and realign it with the work of INA's Partner Engagement Directorate to streamline operations and eliminate redundancies. This plan must specifically address ways to improve coordination with law enforcement agencies, centralize points of contact, and enhance information sharing. I want to thank Representative Evans for his leadership, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman for Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, engagement with state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement is essential to the Department of Homeland Security's mission to secure the homeland. State and local law enforcement partners must have clear points of contact within DHS to maximize information sharing and collaboration on issues like emergency and cybersecurity incident response. H.R. 7574 aims to ensure this by directing the Secretary of Homeland Security to realign the functions and personnel within the Office of Intelligence and Analysis's Engagement, Liaison, and Outreach Office. Madam Speaker, while it is important for state and local officials to have clear points of contact at DHS for information sharing and collaboration, H.R. 7574's requirement to identify redundancies at the Office of Intelligence and Analysis should not, I hope, be viewed as a pretext to reduce INA's workforce. INA is charged with delivering timely and actionable intelligence to our law enforcement on the front lines, and unnecessarily slashing their capacity could unintentionally create security gaps and make our communities more vulnerable to cyber, terror, attacks, and other threats. While I understand that H.R. 7574 seeks to improve DHS relationships with law enforcement agencies by establishing clear communication protocols and centralizing points of contact for law enforcement engagement, I urge DHS to consult with Congress on the implementation of this bill and before any staffing changes or reductions are made. We need to strengthen, not undermine, INA's ability to protect the homeland. And with that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Evans.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Chairman, and I want to thank my bipartisan partner on this, Rep. Goldman. Today I rise to urge my colleagues to support the bipartisan bill, the Engagement Liaison and Outreach Realignment and Strategic Engagement Reform Act. This bill consolidates the functions of two existing Department of Homeland Security offices tasked with public safety coordination into one centralized point of contact. DHS's Office of Intelligence and Analysis, also known as INA, is the only entity in the U.S. intelligence community responsible for delivering intelligence directly to state and local law enforcement agencies. As a former cop for over a decade in the Denver metro area, I know there's nothing more critical to law enforcement operations than open communication between local, state, and federal agencies. Information sharing between the men and women on the front lines and federal intelligence counterparts ensures that bad actors, often tied to international criminal organizations like cartels and terrorist groups, are removed from our streets as quickly as possible. From my own experience, I know that state and local law enforcement often face national and international threats, terrorists, cartels, cyber attacks, foreign enemy regimes. This bill supports state and local law enforcement when they encounter those national or those international threats. Unfortunately, in my home state of Colorado, Denver Democrats are often more concerned about finding ways to weaken law enforcement operations and attacking our brave officers rather than prioritizing public safety. Defund the police antics create public safety conflicts and confusion for law enforcement officers who are trying to serve and protect their communities. This bill ensures that state and local agencies can easily and frequently access the resources they require from their federal partners when they're facing threats that require federal backing. By reorganizing the ELO office and realigning its essential functions within INA's Partner Engagement Directorate, this bill streamlines coordination between law enforcement agencies, enhances information sharing mechanisms, and reduces duplicative actions. This ensures responsible stewardship of taxpayer dollars, and it makes sure that state and local law enforcement agencies have the information that they need when they're facing those national or international threats. Time and again, we wait for tragedies to remind us that we have to incentivize interagency collaboration. This bill takes the fight to the streets, and it makes sure that we are preventively getting these resources to our state and local law enforcement agencies, because no single law enforcement agency can effectively address the full spectrum of threats without that combined resource. I strongly urge support for this bipartisan piece of legislation and to support the millions of state and local law enforcement officers across our country, and I yield back.
I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time.
Recognized.
Madam Speaker, I appreciate the gentleman's and the committee's work on H.R. 7574, and it sounds like I think we're in alignment. I just want to be sure that the language in the bill referring to redundancies isn't used to defund the INA at the Department of Homeland Security. It sounds like gentlemen and I are on the same page. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 7574. Congratulate Mr. Evans on this fine piece of legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 7574? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to consider is laid on the table. Sorry? For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3535, the Stop Foreign Funds in Elections Act.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 641, H.R. 3535, a bill to amend the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971 to apply the prohibition against contributions and donations by foreign nationals in connection with elections to contributions or donations in connection with ballot initiatives and referenda.
The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stile, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Morrell, each will control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members will have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include additional material on the bill.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I rise today. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 3535, the Stop Foreign Funds and Elections Act, introduced by my friend, Representative Brian Fitzpatrick. U.S. elections should be for U.S. citizens only, and only U.S. citizens should be participating in and donating in political causes. Today, gaps in our existing laws undermine this principle and actually permit foreign actors to fund U.S. political activities. It's true. Current law allows foreign funding to infiltrate state and local ballot initiatives, referenda, and recall elections. As we've seen in recent history, those races can attract millions of dollars in outside spending. Some of that has been foreign money, and right now, that's completely legal. Shadowy groups like 1630 Fund have funneled millions of foreign-linked dollars into ballot initiatives and campaigns in states including Arizona, Nevada, and Ohio. It sounds crazy, but it's true, Madam Speaker. We should all be able to agree that foreign funds should not be influencing or financing ballot measures, referenda, or recall elections. Current law, as we know, already prohibits foreign money in federal elections, and this bill broadens that nonpartisan, common-sense prohibition to similar state and local elections. Madam Speaker, elections should be decided by Americans, and they should not be influenced or funded by foreign nationals. I urge all of my colleagues to support this legislation and ensure American elections remain for American citizens only. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. This bipartisan bill, the Stop Foreign Funds and Elections Act, will close a loophole, as my colleague and friend, Mr. Stile, the chairman of the Committee on House Administration, has indicated, that currently allows foreign nationals to contribute to state and local ballot initiatives as well as recall referenda. This change is needed because the Federal Elections Commission previously determined that the Federal Election Campaign Act's foreign national prohibition does not actually reach ballot initiatives that do not appear to be linked to an office-seeking candidate at the federal, state, or local level. The FEC often sends to Congress legislative recommendations adopted on a bipartisan basis to update and strengthen our campaign finance regime. And this very bill has been included in their recent recommendations. In fact, this bill is among the highest priority legislative recommendations from the FEC. And I want to thank the bill's sponsor, Congressman Fitzpatrick, as well as the bill's co-lead, Congressman Golden, for their important work on this issue. And I'm glad to see the House taking seriously the risk of foreign interference in domestic elections. And in that spirit, I encourage my colleagues to consider other comprehensive democracy reforms to close loopholes. House Democrats' Freedom to Vote Act, which includes the Disclose Act, would crack down on foreign campaign spending. And I think it's well past time for Congress to do something to stem the tide of dark money, including foreign money, in American elections. This bill is a start, and I think I would continue to urge us to do more. But with that, I encourage my colleagues to support the bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself so much time as I may consume.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, this bill is broadly about making sure that American elections are for American citizens only. As my colleague, Mr. Morelli, noted, there's a significant gaping hole in U.S. campaign finance laws. And in particular, that's in relation to the measures that we've spoken about ballot initiatives, other essential pieces of American democracy that currently allow for foreign funding to come in and influence those campaigns. And while that's not an office seeker for elected office, I think it's without a doubt that those elections and those ballot initiatives are in many ways equally essential to American democracy. And so closing out this gap and making sure that foreign funds are not finding their way into U.S. elections is absolutely essential. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Fitzpatrick, for authoring this legislation, of understanding the importance of making sure that we're rooting out foreign funds inside U.S. elections. There's a basic premise and a basic principle. And in particular, at a period of time when it is so simple and so easy for funds to be transmitted into these political activities here in the United States of America. An individual outside the United States could easily move funds in to influence a U.S. election. Of course, it's illegal for a donation to be made to an individual seeking federal elected office. But right now, the underlying law does not ban that for purposes of ballot initiatives, local ballot initiatives, referenda, or recall elections. And this legislation fixes that very important point. So, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to not only concur with my colleague about the importance of making sure that we don't have involvement of foreign entities into our politics. I do think, in many ways, if I can just opine for a minute, one of the real challenges I think facing this country right now is the lack of faith in their government and Americans losing trust and losing faith. Part of that is because of the broad influence of money just generally in our politics. And you see billionaires contributing hundreds of millions of dollars. We see the influence of dark money, of super PACs. So I'm looking forward to, over the next several months, working with my colleagues, and over the next several years, if need be, to repair some of the damage to those relationships and to let the people of this country know that the democracy, which we celebrate 250 years of this month, that it is in their hands, that they are ultimately the sovereigns and there weren't outside influences. But I think that's becoming harder and harder to be able to make that point and to convince people of that without dramatic changes in the way we finance our campaigns and the way that the public dialogue engages. And frankly, I'm disappointed in the Supreme Court's decision just this month related to coordination between super PACs and party committees and individual candidates. So I think there's much to do. If we're going to have the ability to persuade American citizens that their government is theirs, we're going to have to take out the influence of all manner of people, and certainly this bill is a step in the right direction. And I see my colleague, the sponsor of the bill, has arrived, so I'll reserve the balance of my time and certainly let him address the House.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Madam Speaker, I yield as much time as you may consume to the author of the bill, our colleague and friend, Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thanks to the chairman for yielding. I rise today in strong support of our legislation, H.R. 3535, the Stop Foreign Funds and Elections Act. Madam Speaker, this legislation is built on a simple principle. American elections should be decided by the American people, not by the influence of foreign actors. The Stop Foreign Funds and Elections Act closes a dangerous and longstanding loophole in our current election system. While current federal law already prohibits foreign nationals from contributing to candidates running for office, there remains gaps when it comes to state and local ballot measures. Ballot initiatives, referendum, and recall elections often determine major public policy questions that directly affect American communities, yet existing law does not clearly prohibit foreign money from being used to influence these outcomes. This bill closes that loophole. Madam Speaker, this is not a partisan issue. Whether the issue on the ballot is one you support or oppose, every American should agree that the outcome should reflect the will of the American voters, not the financial influence of foreign interests. Our elections and ballot measures exist to give the American people a voice, not outside actors with agendas that may conflict with our national interests. The Stop Foreign Funds and Elections Act simply extends an existing safeguard to ensure that all taxpayer-funded elections receive the same protection from foreign influence. I want to thank Congressman Golden for his partnership on this legislation, as well as Chairman Stile and Ranking Member Morell for their engagement on this legislation, and I urge all my colleagues to support this common sense bill to strengthen the integrity of our electoral system and ensure that our democratic process remains accountable to the citizens that it serves. I yield back.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers. I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I again reiterate our support for the bill. I want to thank the bill's sponsor, Mr. Fitzpatrick, as well as Mr. Golden for their work on this, and continue to believe that there's much we can do and much that we need to do, and this is an important step along the way. So I want to thank my colleague and my friend, Chairman Stile, for bringing the bill before us, and I urge all my colleagues to vote. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'll close by saying I thank my colleague, Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, the ranking member, Mr. Morelli, for his work on closing this gap in federal law. I encourage all of our colleagues to vote in favor of H.R. 3535, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3535? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without recognition, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. First, does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8738, the FEC Administrative Improvements Act.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 8738, a bill to amend the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971 to require electronic report filing for persons making certain electioneering communications and to permit political committees to make disbursements other than by check.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stile, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Morello, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members will have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include additional material on the bill.
Objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself so much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.R. 8738, the FEC Administrative Improvement Acts. And I want to thank my friend, Ranking Member Morelli, and the chair of our subcommittee on elections, Representative Lee from Florida, for their leadership on this legislation. Our campaign finance system wasn't designed for the digital age. That extends to the statutes governing the work of the Federal Elections Commission. This bill implements several recommendations from the FEC to modernize their administrative operations and reduce outdated administrative burdens. The bill expands the electronic filing requirements to electioneering communications reports and allows political committees to make disbursements by methods other than checks. Madam Speaker, the work of the FEC is important to our federal election system. This bill improves their efficiency and modernizes our campaign finance system for the digital age. I urge immediate passage of the legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is, and I agree again with my colleague and friend, Chairman Stile, this is a meaningful bipartisan bill to ensure that the public receives important information about election-relevant communications. I was happy to co-introduce this bill with several members of the Committee on House Administration, both Republican and Democratic, and thank you to Chairman Stile for his leadership, to Congresswoman Lee and Congresswoman Sewell for their work on this. As people may know, Congresswoman Lee and Congresswoman Sewell particularly work hard on election administration issues of the leaders of the committee's elections subcommittee. And as it becomes harder to find common ground in Congress, I commend my co-sponsors for their work on this and other issues important to the work at hand. The bill we're considering today, the FEC Administrative Improvements Act, would amend the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971 to require campaign committees to file their electioneering communications with the Federal Elections Commission in electronic format as opposed to on paper. As the FEC has informed Congress, compared to data from paper reports, data from electronically filed reports is received, processed, and disseminated more easily and efficiently, resulting in the better use of resources. I couldn't agree more. In contrast, paper filings take days to be available to provide critical information for the public. So modernizing our campaign disclosure functions is a common sense reform for those of us who live in the 21st century, and we're grateful we get an opportunity to do that. But there are substantive reasons to make this change as well. The Supreme Court has long recognized that disclosure requirements are vitally important. Disclosure provides the electorate with information as to where political campaign money comes from and how it's spent. American voters are best equipped to choose leaders when they have the most fulsome, up-to-date information at hand. And the FEC Administrative Improvements Act would also tackle another bipartisan legislative recommendation from the FEC, allowing committees to make disbursement in ways other than by check. The Committee on House Administration, and I speak, I think, for colleagues on both sides, cares deeply about modernization, and modernizing Congress has in recent years driven thoughtful and bipartisan work by committee members to improve the function of this institution. So in our interest, modernization extends to the FEC. So H.R. 8738 will bring the FEC into the modern era and aid every American voter as they exercise their fundamental rights. So given the bipartisan agreement on the bill, I hope we can move it rapidly from the floor to the Senate and then the President's desk for signatures. Again, want to thank my colleague, Chairman Stile, for his courtesies and for his leadership in this. And with that, I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Madam Speaker, I'm prepared to close. I reserve.
The gentleman's recognized. Oh, I'm sorry, you reserve. Gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Very simply, thank you to the chairman. Thank you to my colleagues. I look forward to what I hope is a unanimous or near unanimous vote in the House on important legislation. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank my colleague, the ranking member, Mr. Morelli, for his work on this legislation. There's a lot of work to be done to update our campaign finance laws for the digital age, and this is an important piece of legislation. I encourage all of my colleagues to vote in favor of H.R. 8738. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 8738? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the ordering of a recorded vote on the question of reconsideration of the vote on adoption of House Resolution 1398 be vacated to the end that the motion to reconsider be laid on the table, and that House Resolution 1377 be laid on the table.
Without objection. Pursuant to the Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. tonight.